Hey guys, before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that there's something really important that I'm doing regarding this video and issues that I think are really important. So I'd really appreciate it if you stuck around till the end of the video to see what that's all about. Apologies if there's more ads than normal on this video, I'll explain at the end. But anyway, let's just get into the video. Just when I thought I was done talking about Spider-Man. Whew, boy, this has been a crazy few days. This has been a pretty crazy few days. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll know that I've been really active regarding this whole Spider-Man thing, but I just wanted to make this video to put my review out there and to solidify my opinions on the whole matter. But first, before we get into it, I do want to clear up my personal biases regarding Spider-Man and specifically the MCU version of the character. Literally, this entire channel started when I had mixed feelings about Homecoming, and then it started just kind of steamrolling from there. So no, I don't really care for the way the MCU has handled the character, that's very clear. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that I wanted him gone. Of course I didn't. He's my favorite character. Like, I do think that there is value to the concept of the Marvel Universe connected to Spider-Man. I just think that it was done in a way that hindered the character. I've been on record for saying that I wouldn't mind seeing Sony take the rights back, but I didn't actually expect it to happen. But that's just, getting my biases out there. Let's do a quick little brief history lesson, and mansplain a little bit what exactly has been going on the past few days. If you're here, you probably know exactly what it is already, but just in case someone like my grandma's watching, I don't want to leave her out of the loop. Hey grandma, how you doing? So a long time ago, way back in like medieval times, Marvel Comics was going bankrupt. So in a last-ditch effort to save themselves, they decided to sell the movie rights to their most popular characters, with X-Men and the Fantastic Four going to Fox, and Spider-Man being sold to Sony Pictures. Not much later, the first X-Men and Spider-Man movies come out, and the superhero movie business starts to boom. Fast forward a bit, Sony reboots the Spider-Man franchise for reasons that are unrelated, and that series does pretty poorly, both critically and commercially. All the while, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is owned by Marvel and now consequently Disney, because Disney has bought Marvel by this point, that is thriving. So in 2015, Marvel and Sony struck a deal to reboot Spider-Man yet again, but this time incorporate him within the MCU, where he can interact with other Marvel characters like Iron Man, and most importantly, Iron Man. So Spider-Man is recast as Tom Holland, who's going to be playing a younger version of the character, the youngest we've ever seen. And the deal currently is a little unclear. We were not really sure what that deal was, but we do know that Disney would have a hand in making these Spider-Man movies, while Sony would get 95% of the profits, with Disney getting the other 5%. All the while, Disney is able to use the character of Spider-Man in other movies like Avengers: Infinity War and retain 100% of the profits. There are some more complicated things regarding the use of characters and such, but we'll get into that later. Don't worry about that. So, two of those movies are made, Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home, in addition to Spider-Man being featured in Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame. The interpretation of this version of the character is divisive, to say the least, but for the most part, it's considered a success. So, what happened? Why is everybody freaking out? Well, reports are a bit shifty, but here's what we know so far. Reportedly, Disney approached Sony and wanted to change the deal so that they received 50% of the profits from the Spider-Man movies and all the Spider-Man related movies that Sony was making. The numbers change depending on who's talking, but it averages somewhere between 25% to 30% to 50%, but Sony refused this deal, and so thus Disney decided to pull Spider-Man out entirely from the MCU. And that's when everybody lost their Twitter's honestly already a madhouse regarding the character of Spider-Man, but this news let the hounds out, and they are out for blood. Let me get a couple misconceptions out of the way first. I see a lot of misinformation regarding the deal and what happened and who's to blame and everything. While I don't have all the answers, there are a few things that I think are definitive enough to say. The first thing is that Tom Holland is not going anywhere. We're not getting a full reboot. Tom Holland is here to stay on as the character for at least 2 more movies, with reportedly the director John Watts also contractually obligated for at least 1 more. Tom Holland is not losing his job the same way that Andrew Garfield did back in 2012, 15, whenever that happened. So, whose fault is it? Who do I blame? Who do I boycott? This is kind of complicated. At first glance, it reads as though Disney wanted to get a fair stake in the movies that they were helping to create. That's fair, right? 50%? That's fine. That's not so simple.
Would that it was so simple.
50-50 sounds fair until you remember that Disney owns 100% of the merchandising for the character, an industry that is more profitable than the box office revenue, and that they also get 100% of the profits for any Avengers or other MCU movie to feature the character. So, Avengers Endgame is the highest grossing movie of all time, period, and it features the character that Sony has the right to, Spider-Man. Sony didn't see a single penny of that. Disney also wanted to profit off of other Spider-Man related movies that Sony was making, specifically the sequels to the critically acclaimed Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and the commercial success of Venom. This is Sony's biggest moneymaker when it comes to movies, and Disney wanted a piece of it despite not having a hand in making them. But here's the thing that I think is the most important personally, and it's the ethics of all of it. Now, I've been very vocal in the past that I do not care for Disney as a corporation. I think that they are a mega conglomerate that has too much power as it is when it comes to the entertainment industry, especially after buying out Fox, their biggest competitor. So to me, the thought of Disney making that much profit off of another company's work and independent property, it's just gross to me, and I'm optimistic enough to believe that Sony felt the same way, and so that's part of why they pulled out. You could argue that it was greedy of Sony to want 95% of the box office revenue for the Spider-Man movies, but I'd say it was greedier of Disney to try and get up to 10 times the amount of money for the movies, in addition to other ridiculous demands, as well as the money they've been making on their own as the biggest media company in the world. I don't want to say that Sony's completely innocent here, because Sony is another huge corporation whose only goal here is to make money, but when compared to the behemoth that is Disney, it comes across as a company just trying to make it through. But what does this actually mean regarding the movies? Well, like I said, Tom Holland isn't going anywhere. He might hate that he's not an Avenger, but he's contractually required to stay on for at least 2 more. Sony will continue with this version of Spider-Man. But the main and very important difference being that now the Spider-Man movies are not legally allowed to reference any of the other Marvel characters that Sony does not own, such as the Avengers, or most importantly to this version of the character, Iron Man. This is a bit of a pickle for Sony. I guess you could say it's a bit of a sticky situation, since the character up to this point has been so heavily reliant on the MCU, with his motivation always being tied to the Avengers or Iron Man in some way or another. To continue the story without referencing those aspects would be really strange. It'd be really weird. Now, whether or not the character should have been written that way in the first place is a debate for another time. I'm pretty sure everybody who knows me, they know my opinion on that. But one can only wonder that maybe this was Disney's intention, to make it so difficult story-wise for Sony to take Spider-Man out that they had to continue the deal. But that's where I come in. Making stupid petty YouTube videos about Spider-Man and how he should be handled is what I do for a living. So, what can Sony do? It seems impossible, right? Peter has the MCU so ingrained into him at this point that there's no way it can be just removed without being jarring at all. And yeah, you're right. It can. It would be difficult. But I do think there's a possibility that it can be done if in the right hands and done the right way. This next movie by Sony needs to be a bit of a slate cleaner. Not like in a One More Day style kind of forced way of wiping the slate, but a semi-soft reboot of the character. So here's my pitch for the movie, Spider-Man Grounded. A bit more serious and darker than the previous 2 movies, this movie has Peter face off against organized crime in New York while trying to clear his name. The first thing is regarding Peter's character. I don't think it would be that much of a stretch to have Peter develop a bit off-screen and start to behave less like an Iron Man fan and more like the Spider-Man that we know from the comics. It might be a bit jarring, especially when it comes to the removal of some characters like Happy and potentially Ned, but if written around well, it could be believable. You could say that, quote-unquote, the company isn't able to help Peter because it would be a bad image for them and they can't assist him and all that stuff. It's possible. It's certainly possible. Somebody like MJ, this version of MJ is complicated because Mary Jane Watson is owned by Sony, but the version of her in the previous movies was actually Michelle Jones, so the original MJ could potentially be stuck in limbo and not usable by Sony or Marvel, but they could potentially use the name MJ to explain that maybe she moved away or was put into witness protection or something because of her connection to Peter, yada, yada, yada. She could then come back in a future movie like when Peter goes to college or something, and with her new name being Mary Jane Watson, and she'd still be legally used by Sony, you know, same actress, same Zendaya, probably a bit of a personality shift a little bit just to keep it legally distinct, but that's a possibility. And the same can apply for Ned, who can come back as Genki, who's clearly his inspiration. The biggest hurdle, I think, that the movie faces is related to the mid-credit scene of Spider-Man Far From Home. Pretty big spoilers for that movie, but it ends with Peter Parker getting his identity revealed to the world and being framed for mass murder. It's pretty clear that the original intent was to have this storyline resolved using something out of the MCU, potentially with somebody like Matt Murdock or She-Hulk representing Peter in court, while also using like the Skrulls to shapeshift or Doctor Strange or something to clear Peter's name. But we don't have those characters now. We don't have anybody except for Spider-Man and the characters directly related to him. So how do we clear Peter's name and prove that he's innocent? If only there was a Spider-Man character who could get Peter out of this kind of situation. Somebody who can change form and look like anybody. Oh wait, there is. And his name's the Chameleon. I just want to go on record and say that I love the Chameleon. He's easily one of the coolest Spider-Man villains, and he represents a side of the Rogues Gallery that I don't think gets enough credit, and that's the small-scale, organized crime side of the Spider-Man villains. His involvement in this movie not only can lead to interesting stories of him posing as Peter and Spider-Man, only to then, be beaten and used to clear Peter's name, but he can also be working under the true mastermind of this operation, the top dog of organized crime in New York. Normally this role is filled by Kingpin, but Sony doesn't have Kingpin. They have Tombstone. Tombstone is awesome. Think Luke Cage, but instead of being the beautiful, incredible, gorgeous man that is Mike Coulter, he's a criminal mastermind that just wants to rule over New York. So just like the Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon, Tombstone is going to be taking that role as the big man of crime. During Peter's involvement with Tombstone, he's forced to break into some high-security science lab, and that's where he runs into another criminal with the same goals of taking Tombstone down, the Black Cat. Felicia Hardy is after Tombstone for personal reasons that we don't know of yet, and the two decide to work together to take him down, but not before something tags along with Peter. a black goop manages to escape from the lab and stick to his foot, and Peter eventually bonds with the Venom symbiote. It might take a little bit of retconning in a Venom sequel, but I think it is possible that the Venom symbiote bonded with Peter before bonding with Eddie, and then that can lead to a Spider-Man Venom movie where we know both characters and there's an actual connection between the two of them. Because as it stands, that doesn't exist yet, and I think it'd be important to build that up. So, the movie is Black Suit Spider-Man teaming up with Black Cat to take down Tombstone of the Chameleon. It's literally ripped out of the Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon, which I think is the gold standard for the character. The movie can explore some really interesting themes, especially when it leads to the reveal that Felicia wants back at Tombstone because he's responsible in a way for getting her father arrested, the same man who killed Uncle Ben. This plot reinforced the concept of responsibility and how important Ben was to this version of the character, because we've kind of forgotten that part. Peter can struggle with these issues all the while having the symbiote feed off of his pain, and it can culminate with him almost killing Felicia's father before running off to remove the suit, tying it to Venom for later. Peter and Felicia beat Tombstone and then go their separate ways, and the next day, Peter sees on the news that his name's been cleared and the world no longer believes he's Spider-Man. He meets with Felicia on a rooftop, and she says that she may or may not have broken into Chameleon's cell and threatened him into a false confession that he was posing as Peter Parker even in London, clearing Peter of all charges and setting him up for future movies with a universe of his own. Obviously, this isn't in depth as my other pre-writes or anything, but it's just a general pitch for a movie that I truly believe could be impressive if done the right way. The character of Spider-Man has more than enough potential to have a cinematic universe of his own. It's great to have the other Marvel characters around. I really wanted to see the Fantastic Four and Daredevil and Wolverine, but the most important thing is to tell a singular solo story that pushes the character forward. I think that this would be the best possible way for Sony to do this kind of soft reboot in a way that's hopefully not too jarring without the MCU. Now, believe me, Sony could screw it up. That's obvious, of course they could. But it's just an idea to maybe give you hope that there's potential for stories about the character. Because Peter doesn't need Iron Man or the Avengers. He's Spider-Man. If anybody can handle things on his own, it's this guy. But there's something more important that I do want to talk about. It's a funny thing, the whole great power and responsibility idea. There's this one huge responsibility that we have all been ignoring, me included, and that's the responsibility to our planet. Right at this moment, while the world's freaking out about Spider-Man and D23 and Star Wars and everything like that, the rainforests are burning. The most sacred and important life force on the planet is literally being burned alive, and not enough people are doing anything about it. And that's why I've decided to donate 100% of this video's profits to help protect the rainforest. It won't be very much, because I don't make a ton, but I just feel like that this is a subject that not enough people are caring about. I just can't shake this feeling that I'm ignoring a problem that I'm able to help out with at least a little bit. And that's the point of Spider-Man, right? Using the tools at your disposal and what you can do to help out where you can. So for the first month after this video goes live, I'm going to donate every penny that I earn from YouTube AdSense for this video, in addition to 100% of my Patreon and 100% of any merchandise sales that I make. And I'm going to be donating it to the Amazon Conservation Association. Upon payment from YouTube and Patreon and Teespring and all that, I will be making a community post detailing exactly how much I received from this video and how much I'm going to donate. If you're capable, I highly encourage you to do the same and donate as much as you can, or purchase some merchandise from the link in the description. If you're not able to afford that based on your current situation, that's perfectly understandable. I just request that you share this video as much as you can and turn off ad block when you watch it, just so I can maximize the amount of revenue without costing you a penny. But with that said, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, go ahead, hit that like button. It really, really helps me out, and it would help other people see this video for sure. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss any future updates. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Troy Boy 17 coming at you live, and I'll see you around.